Today is the 26th Sunday of Ordinary Time. In some churches, this Sunday is also commemorated as a Sunday of social justice. And it is very appropriate for the readings today to have this as the topic, and also for us as we are dealing with these topics for the couple of weeks, where we have been dealing about the cardinal virtues. And it's very appropriate that today we try to meditate on this virtue of justice. And the two readings, the first reading from the prophet Amos and the gospel, very clearly points to this important theme of justice, where the first reading, prophet Amos, is telling the people who were in that kind of prosperity, where they were blind to that cause, something that was rottening in that society. They were not seeing that, and warning them against this injustice that was prevalent, and they being blind to it. And again, in the gospel, we are reminded through this parable of the rich man who blinded himself to the sufferings of a poor man, denying him the justice which was due to him. But when we speak about justice in a secular term, usually people understand justice as something with regarding to something that we have to attain politically. So justice is, in a secular term, understood as a political accomplishment. But in Christian faith, we never understand it just as a political accomplishment, but rather it is always a personal virtue. Donald DeMarco, in one of his articles regarding justice, he illustrates this by giving an example of one of his friends, Christina Sommers. She was a professor of philosophy, and she had a colleague, and they were both teaching social justice. This colleague was not so Christian, and she was very adamant to this point that justice has nothing to do with personal virtue. It is just a political accomplishment. And that's why we have to be very adamant about it. We have to work out, we have to raise our voices against the injustice in the society, like the racial inequality, about the inequality between the poor and the rich and everything. So when her friend, that is Christina, was trying to teach her students about this virtue also being a part of morality, and as a virtue, she was against her, and she used to criticize her, telling, this is not what you should be doing. You are harming the students. But something strange happened. At the end of the semester, her colleague realized they had this exam for social justice. She realized half of them cheated. Half of them cheated this exam. It is then she realized. And then Christina asked her, what do you want to do? And she very sarcastically, with a smile, asked her, give me the essay that you wrote about virtue, ethics without virtue. That's why in a Christian circumstance, we can never speak about justice without speaking about in regarding to virtue. That's why in the second reading, St. Paul is very clear. Pursue righteousness, pursue justice, pursue goodness, pursue gentleness. Then this is what we have to compete in faith. If this is not achieved as a part of faith, it will be something away from us. Something which even we don't see in the parables today, which the rich man didn't understand. That's why when you take the parable as such, what can we accuse the rich man of? Can we accuse the rich man about making this poor man poor? The parable does not say it. The poor man was poor for many other reasons. The parable doesn't say he is responsible for it. Then does he in any way add to the poverty or to the suffering of this poor man? The parable is very clear. He doesn't do that knowingly in any way. The only thing he seems to have done is close his eyes towards this suffering that is taking place at front of his door. It's very paradoxical that this person who is lying in front of this house, a very spacious, a very sumptuous and very luxurious house, and there is this man who is in front of his door, very, very dirty, very awkward and very, why didn't he notice it? Maybe he didn't want to notice it. It is not that he didn't notice it, maybe he's shutting himself to the reality that is there. Or maybe he thought, maybe it is not my job to look into what is happening over. Maybe it's not my responsibility. Just as the Cain asked God, when God asked Cain, where is your brother? Then Cain asked God, am I my brother's guardian? Maybe this was what the sentiment was in this rich man's heart. And that's why it is interesting in this parable that the rich man does not have a name. Does not have a name. Because in the face of God, in God's kingdom and God's values, he is no one. In our world, whom do we say has a name? People who have status, who have power, who have money are the people who have something. We say they have a name. And people who are poor, who are the voiceless and the faceless, they have no names. But in the kingdom of God, it's just the reversal of this. It's just the reversal of this. It's the people who are the voiceless and the faceless will have a name before God. This the rich man did not realize. Actually, in the whole parable, there are two parts. You could see this difference, a complete reversal of values that is being taking place. The first part is where we see this rich man in all his grandeur, all his richness, and the poor man in his poverty and all his suffering. At the second part of the parable, we see a reversal of the stand. The rich man is suffering, and the poor man is enjoying everything, the richness of the kingdom. And then he's asking, in this torment, this rich man is asking, can you help us? Can you help me in this torment? Then Abraham says one interesting thing. There is a chasm, there is a gap which cannot be crossed. But who is responsible for this gap? For who is responsible for this chasm? Isn't the rich man himself responsible for this chasm? Because he himself created this gap between him and the poor man. He thought, I have nothing to do with this. He isolated himself from the suffering of this poor man. And there is this reversal. Now he has to undergo the isolation. Before, if it was the poor man who had to suffer the isolation, now it is the rich man who is suffering the isolation. And in the first part, if the rich man thought, everything that I have belongs to me. He thought, I am the owner of everything. Forgetting that God has given everything to him as a steward. He is just a steward of everything. He doesn't own anything. What happens? In the second part, he is disowned by God. He thought he is the owner of everything, and then because of that, when he goes to where the real justice, he has to face real justice, he's been disowned by God. This is what justice is. This is what real Christian justice is. That's why justice is not just about a political accomplishment for us. It is a personal virtue that we have to pursue, that we have to work towards. And basically it comes from this understanding. As Aristotle would say, justice is that understanding or the ordering of the soul by virtue of which I understand that no, I don't belong to anyone, but rather it is to God to whom I belong. And to God to whom that everything that belongs to me belongs to. And because of which I have a responsibility of all that has been entrusted to me. all that has been entrusted to me, whether be it wealth, whether be it my talents or anything. And if we fail in that, we will have to face this question of justice. As we know, the first question that we have to face God will be the question of justice. Did you feed? Did you give your brother your drinks? Did you shelter him? Did you show mercy? These are the first questions, the questions of mercy that we will have to face. That's why let us be aware of what we go after in this world, because what we will get will be what we go after here, right now, in this world.